The spring sun beat down mercilessly on Harriet Foster's tear-stained face as she stumbled down the steps of Silver Creek Church, her wedding dress catching on the rough wooden boards. Whispers followed her like shadows as the townsfolk of Cottonwood Springs watched her humiliation unfold before their very eyes. The man she had loved, trusted, and planned to build a life with had just announced to the entire congregation that he could not marry her, not after discovering she had been corresponding with another man. A false accusation that had shattered her world in an instant. "You bring shame to this town, Harriet Foster," her almost mother-in-law hissed as she passed, the woman's face contorted with disgust. "My son deserves better than a woman of questionable virtue." Harriet could barely see through her tears as she made her way down the dusty main street, the white satin of her gown now smudged with dirt, the carefully arranged flowers in her hair falling loose around her shoulders. The year was 1876, and in Cottonwood Springs, Wyoming territory, a woman's reputation was everything. Without it, she had nothing. "Miss Foster." A deep voice called from behind her. She didn't stop. She couldn't bear to face another person, to see the judgment in their eyes, to hear the cruelty in their words. "Miss Foster, please wait." The voice was closer now, followed by the sound of boots hitting the packed dirt of the street. A strong hand gently caught her elbow, stopping her retreat. "Don't touch me," she sobbed, not looking up. "I don't believe a word of what Robert Dawson said in there," the man said, his voice quiet but firm. "And I won't stand by while a good woman is treated this way." Harriet finally looked up through her tears to see Gabriel Hayes, the owner of the Hayes cattle ranch that bordered the town to the north. His deep blue eyes held nothing but kindness beneath the brim of his well-worn hat. Though they had exchanged pleasantries over the years when he came to town for supplies, they had never spoken more than a few words to each other. "It doesn't matter what you believe," Harriet whispered, her voice breaking. "My reputation is ruined. I have nowhere to go." Gabriel removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair. "I'll stand with you, Miss Foster," he said simply. "Whatever you need." Harriet stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." A small, sad smile crossed his weathered face. "I know enough. I know you teach the children at the schoolhouse with more patience than a saint. I know you care for your ailing father without complaint. And I know Robert Dawson has been courting Emily Wilson behind your back for months." Her heart seemed to stop. "What?" Gabriel nodded grimly. "I've seen them meeting at the old Henderson place when he claims to be checking fence lines for his father's ranch. This accusation against you is nothing but a coward's way out of his commitment." Fresh tears welled in Harriet's eyes, but this time they were fueled by anger rather than shame. "All these months," she whispered, "I've been such a fool." "No," Gabriel said firmly. "You've been betrayed. There's a difference." The sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. Harriet's father, Joseph Foster, was making his way toward them as quickly as his cane would allow, his face etched with concern. "Harriet," he called, his voice strained. "My dear girl." "Papa," she cried, rushing to meet him. "I didn't do what they said. I swear it." Joseph Foster wrapped his free arm around his daughter. "I know, my dear. I never doubted you for a moment." Gabriel approached them, hat still in hand. "Mr. Foster, I'd like to offer my assistance to you and your daughter during this difficult time." Joseph looked at the cowboy with wary appreciation. "That's kind of you, Hayes, but what exactly are you proposing?" "For starters, I can take you both home," Gabriel said. "My wagon is hitched just down the street. And then, if you'll allow it, I'd like to help clear Miss Foster's name." "And how do you plan to do that?" Joseph asked. Gabriel's expression hardened. "By exposing the truth about Robert Dawson and his lies." Joseph studied the younger man for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. We accept your help, Mr. Hayes." As Gabriel led them to his wagon, Harriet was keenly aware of the stares that followed them. The man she had been set to marry less than an hour ago was still inside the church, probably being consoled by his family and friends for his narrow escape from a woman of questionable character. The thought made her stomach twist with hurt and anger. "Don't pay them any mind, Miss Foster," Gabriel said quietly as he helped her into the wagon. Small minds talk the loudest. The ride to the Foster home on the edge of town was mercifully short. The modest house came into view, its whitewashed walls and blue shutters a welcome sight to Harriet's weary eyes. Gabriel helped her down from the wagon with gentle hands. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Hayes," she said, unable to meet his gaze. "Gabriel," he corrected her softly, "and there's no need for thanks. I'll return tomorrow to speak with you both about how to proceed." As Gabriel turned to leave, Joseph called after him. "Join us for supper tomorrow, Hayes. It's the least we can do." Gabriel tipped his hat. "I'd be honored, sir." After he'd gone, Harriet collapsed into her father's arms, finally allowing herself to fully break down. "What am I going to do, Papa?" she sobbed. "I can't show my face in town again. Everyone believes that I would." Joseph stroked her hair, just as he had done when she was a little girl. "We'll weather this storm, Harriet. We always have." He led her inside, his voice dropping to a worried whisper. "But I fear this time, we may need help to do so." The next day brought no relief from the pain and humiliation. Harriet moved through the house like a ghost, mechanically helping her father with his morning routine before retreating to her room. She had removed the wedding dress the day before, stuffing it into a trunk where she wouldn't have to look at it. Now dressed in a simple blue day dress, she sat at her small writing desk and stared blankly at the wall. A knock at the front door startled her from her thoughts. Her father's voice carried through the house as he greeted their visitor. "Hayes, right on time. Mr. Foster, I hope today finds you well as can be expected. Come in, come in." Harriet took a deep breath and pinched her cheeks to bring some color back to her face before making her way to the parlor. Gabriel stood by the fireplace, hat in hand, dressed in clean trousers and a pressed shirt. He looked different away from the dust of the street, less the rugged cowboy and more the successful rancher he was known to be. "Miss Foster," he said with a respectful nod. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Please sit down." Once they were all seated, Gabriel got straight to the point. "I've been making inquiries in town," he said. "Discreetly, of course." "And?" Joseph asked, leaning forward in his chair. "And I've confirmed what I suspected. Robert has been seen with Emily Wilson regularly for the past 6 months. They've been careful, but not careful enough." Harriet's hands trembled in her lap. "6 months," she echoed. "We've been engaged for 8. Gabriel's expression softened with sympathy. "There's more. The letter he claimed to have found, the one supposedly between you and another man. Several people heard him arguing with his mother about breaking the engagement days before the wedding. She was against it, said it would bring shame to the family. So he fabricated evidence to make me the villain," Harriet said bitterly. "It would seem so," Gabriel agreed. "But there's a problem. He claims to have burned the letter after showing it to his parents. Without it, it's his word against yours. And in this town, a man's word carries more weight than a woman's," Joseph said with resignation. Gabriel nodded grimly. "Usually, yes, but not always. Not when the man in question has enemies of his own making." Harriet looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Robert Dawson may be the son of a prominent rancher, but he's made plenty of mistakes that his father has covered up over the years. Gambling debts, fights, other women before Emily Wilson." "How do you know all this?" Joseph asked, eyeing Gabriel with renewed interest. A shadow passed over Gabriel's face. "Because I make it my business to know the character of the men around me, especially those who control water rights that affect my ranch." He turned to Harriet. "Miss Foster, with your permission, I'd like to gather evidence of Robert's deception and present it to Reverend Thompson. He's a fair man, and if he can be convinced of the truth, others will follow." Harriet hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "What exactly would that entail?" "I'll need to speak with people who might have seen Robert with Emily, and I'll need to find anyone who might have overheard his conversations with his mother about breaking the engagement." "That seems risky," Harriet said. "The Dawsons are powerful in this town. They own the bank, for heaven's sake. All the more reason to expose their son's dishonesty," Gabriel said firmly. "No family should be above the truth, no matter how wealthy." Joseph cleared his throat. "While I appreciate your determination, Hayes, I worry about the cost to my daughter. Dragging this out in the open could cause her more pain." "With respect, sir, the damage is already done," Gabriel replied. "The only way to undo it is to reveal the truth." A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Harriet spoke. "I'll help you, Mr. Hayes." "Gabriel. Not just for my sake, but because no one should be able to destroy another person's reputation with lies and suffer no consequences. Gabriel's eyes shone with admiration. "You're a brave woman, Miss Foster." "No," she said softly. "Just tired of feeling powerless." As promised, Gabriel stayed for supper. The conversation moved away from Robert Dawson and the wedding disaster to more pleasant topics. Gabriel spoke of his ranch, the 500 acres he'd built up from a small homestead he'd purchased 10 years earlier after coming west from Boston. "Boston?" Harriet asked, surprised. "I wouldn't have taken you for an Easterner." Gabriel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Born and raised. My father was a banker who wanted me to follow in his footsteps. I had other ideas." "So you came west to be a cowboy?" There was a hint of teasing in her voice, the first lightness she'd shown since the previous day. "I came west to be my own man," he corrected gently. "The cattle came later, after I realized I had a knack for breeding good stock." Joseph nodded approvingly. "Hayes runs one of the finest herds in the territory. His bulls fetch top dollar." Gabriel looked almost embarrassed by the praise. "I've been fortunate. Good land, good hands working for me, and good neighbors." His gaze lingered on Harriet for a moment. "Until recently, that is. The Dawsons have been trying to pressure smaller ranchers to sell out. They want to control all the grazing land from here to the mountains. Is that why you're really helping us?" Harriet asked suddenly. "To get back at the Dawsons?" Gabriel considered her question seriously. "That may be part of it," he admitted, "but only a small part. Mostly, I can't abide seeing an innocent person suffer for another's sins." He met her gaze directly. "And I meant what I said yesterday. I'll stand with you, Miss Foster, regardless of how it affects my dealings with the Dawsons." Something in his steady gaze made Harriet believe him completely. For the first time since she'd fled the church in tears, she felt a small spark of hope. After supper, as Gabriel prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Miss Foster, would you consider returning to your teaching position at the school?" The question caught her off guard. "I hadn't thought about it. The school board will likely ask for my resignation after what happened." "Perhaps," Gabriel conceded. "But if you don't resign, they would have to meet formally to dismiss you. That would give us time to present our evidence." "Us?" she asked softly. "If you'll allow me to help," he replied. She studied him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this, Gabriel?" "Truly." He looked down at his hat, turning it in his hands before meeting her eyes again. "Because 18 years ago, my sister found herself in a similar position. Falsely accused, her reputation in tatters. No one stood up for her." His voice grew rough with emotion. "She took her own life rather than face the shame." Harriet gasped softly. "I'm so sorry. I was 15, Gabriel continued quietly. "Too young to help her then." "I'm not too young now." He placed his hat on his head with a determined gesture. "I'll call on you tomorrow, Miss Foster. We have work to do." After he left, Harriet stood in the doorway, watching his tall figure stride toward his waiting horse. For the first time in days, she felt something other than despair, something that felt dangerously like the stirring of admiration. True to his word, Gabriel returned the next day, this time with a plan. "I've spoken with Sally Turner at the general store," he said as they sat in the Foster parlor. "She's confirmed seeing Robert and Emily together multiple times when he claimed to be working. Sally's always been kind to me," Harriet said. "But will her word be enough?" "It's a start," Gabriel replied. "But we need more. I believe Emily Wilson herself might be our best ally." Harriet frowned. "Why would she help clear my name? She's been seeing my fiancé behind my back for months." "Because women like Emily are usually victims themselves," Gabriel said carefully. "Robert has likely been feeding her lies about his engagement to you, perhaps telling her it was arranged by his parents against his will, or that you were the unfaithful one." Harriet considered this. "You may be right. Emily has always been shy around me, almost guilty when we cross paths in town." "I'd like to speak with her," Gabriel said, "but it might be better coming from you." "Me?" Harriet exclaimed. "That would be uncomfortable, to say the least." "Precisely why it might work," Gabriel explained. "Your willingness to speak with her directly, without accusation, might surprise her enough to get the truth." Joseph, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "It's a risky strategy, Hayes. What if the girl panics and makes things worse?" "That's a possibility," Gabriel admitted. "But I believe Emily has more to gain from the truth than from maintaining Robert's lies, especially if she truly cares for him." Harriet took a deep breath. I'll do it. I'll speak with Emily. Her voice grew stronger. And tomorrow, I'm returning to the schoolhouse. Gabriel's eyes widened. Are you certain? It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, she replied, echoing words her mother had often said before her death 10 years earlier. The following morning, Harriet dressed with particular care in her most professional dress, a high-necked navy blue garment with white cuffs. She arranged her chestnut hair in a neat bun at the nape of her neck and pinned her teacher's brooch to her collar. The small gold apple had been a gift from her first class 3 years earlier when she'd taken over the schoolhouse after the previous teacher had married and moved east. You look ready for battle, her father observed as she came downstairs. In a way, I am, she admitted, trying to keep her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. A knock at the door revealed Gabriel, once again dressed in clean, pressed clothes, his hat in his hands. I thought I might walk you to the schoolhouse, he said. If that's acceptable. Harriet felt a rush of gratitude. More than acceptable. The walk through town was an exercise in courage. People stopped and stared, whispers following in their wake. Harriet kept her head high, though her knuckles were white where she gripped her lesson book. You're doing fine, Gabriel murmured as they passed the general store. Just breathe. When they reached the schoolhouse, several mothers were already there with their children. Their conversations died away as Harriet approached. One woman, Martha Jenkins, stepped forward with a stern expression. Miss Foster, we didn't expect to see you here today, she said coldly. Or ever again, for that matter. Harriet summoned all her courage. I am still employed by this school, Mrs. Jenkins. Unless the school board decides otherwise, I will continue to teach your children to the best of my ability. Well, Mrs. Jenkins, Gabriel interrupted smoothly. Your boy Thomas made remarkable progress with his reading last term, did he not? Miss Foster spent extra time with him after school, as I recall. Martha Jenkins faltered, caught off guard. Yes, that's true. Thomas is reading well above his age now. A testament to Miss Foster's dedication, Gabriel said with a polite tip of his hat. Good day, ladies. Children. With that, he stepped back as Harriet unlocked the schoolhouse door. The children, less influenced by adult prejudices, rushed past her with their usual energy, calling out greetings and questions about the day's lessons. As she turned to enter the building, Gabriel caught her eye. I'll return at the end of the school day, he promised. And perhaps we can visit Miss Wilson afterward? Harriet nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you, Gabriel. The school day passed in a blur of lessons, questions, and the comforting routine of education. Some of the older children looked at her curiously, clearly having overheard adult conversations about what had happened at the church. But none mentioned it directly, and by lunchtime, the initial awkwardness had faded. It was during the afternoon reading lesson that the schoolhouse door opened, and Robert Dawson himself stepped inside. The children fell silent as he removed his hat, his handsome face set in a mask of stern disapproval. Miss Foster, he said, his voice carrying across the room. A word, if you please. Harriet's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. We are in the middle of a lesson, Mr. Dawson. If you wish to speak with me, you may return after 3 o'clock when school is dismissed. A flush of anger crept up Robert's neck. This cannot wait. I'm afraid it must, she replied firmly. Children, please continue reading silently while I speak with Mr. Dawson outside. She walked to the door, her legs surprisingly steady, and stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. Robert's handsome face was contorted with barely controlled anger. You have some nerve showing your face in this town after what you did. What I did, Harriet repeated, her own anger rising to meet his. You stand there and accuse me after you fabricated evidence to humiliate me at the altar? I did no such thing, he hissed. I found that letter, and it broke my heart. There was no letter, Harriet said coldly. We both know that. Just as we both know you've been seeing Emily Wilson for months. Robert's face paled slightly before he recovered. That's absurd. You're desperately trying to salvage your reputation by smearing mine. No, Robert, I'm simply telling the truth. Something you seem incapable of doing. His expression darkened. You would be wise to leave town, Harriet. There's nothing for you here anymore. Not after everyone knows what kind of woman you really are. The only thing people will soon know, she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart, is what kind of man you really are. Robert took a threatening step forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I'm warning you, is there a problem here? Gabriel's deep voice cut through the tension as he approached from the direction of town, his hand resting casually near the pistol at his hip. Robert's head snapped around. This doesn't concern you, Hayes. When you threaten a lady on public property, it becomes my concern, Gabriel replied evenly, coming to stand beside Harriet. Lady, Robert scoffed. That's generous. Gabriel's eyes hardened. I suggest you leave now, Dawson, before you say something you'll regret. The two men stared at each other for a long, tense moment before Robert jammed his hat back on his head. This isn't over, he warned before striding away toward his waiting horse. Harriet released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You're early, she said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I had a feeling you might need an ally sooner rather than later, Gabriel replied, his gaze still following Robert's retreating figure. Are you all right? Yes, she said, surprised to find it was true. Facing Robert had been frightening, but also strangely empowering. I need to get back to my students. Gabriel nodded. I'll wait out here. When school was dismissed at 3 o'clock, the children spilled out into the sunshine, their energy undiminished by hours of learning. Gabriel watched them with a slight smile, tipping his hat to the mothers who came to collect the younger ones. You're good with them, he observed as Harriet locked the schoolhouse door behind her. The children, I mean. They're the innocent ones in all this, she replied. Their education shouldn't suffer because of adult problems. They walked together toward the edge of town where the Wilson family lived in a modest house behind the blacksmith shop. Emily's father was the town blacksmith, a hard-working man who had raised Emily alone after his wife died in childbirth. Are you certain about this? Gabriel asked as they approached the house. I could speak with her alone if you prefer. Harriet squared her shoulders. No, this is something I need to do myself. Emily herself answered the door, her pretty face going pale when she saw who had come calling. Miss Foster, she stammered. What are you doing here? Hello, Emily, Harriet said gently. May we speak with you for a moment? It's important. Emily glanced nervously past them, as if expecting to see someone watching. My father isn't home. It's you we've come to see, Gabriel said kindly. We won't take much of your time. After a moment's hesitation, Emily stepped back to allow them inside. The house was small but immaculately kept, with simple furniture and a few feminine touches, embroidered cushions and dried flowers in vases. Please sit down, Emily said, her hands twisting nervously in her apron. Once they were seated, Harriet decided the direct approach was best. Emily, I know about you and Robert. The young woman's face crumpled, tears immediately filling her eyes. I'm so sorry, Miss Foster. I never meant to. He said. He told me. What did he tell you? Gabriel prompted gently when Emily seemed unable to continue. He said your engagement was arranged by his parents, Emily whispered. That he didn't love you. That it was a business arrangement to combine your father's land with the Dawson Ranch. He said you knew that and had agreed to it even though your heart was elsewhere. Harriet felt as if she'd been slapped. My father owns no land beyond our house and garden. And I loved Robert, or at least, I thought I did. Fresh tears streamed down Emily's face. He lied to me. About everything. She looked up, her expression desperate. But I swear, Miss Foster, I never would have. If I had known you truly cared for him. I believe you, Harriet said softly, and was surprised to find it was true. Emily was as much a victim of Robert's manipulations as she was. There's more, Emily said, wiping her tears with the corner of her apron. Last week, Robert told me he was breaking his engagement to you because he'd found a letter proving you were unfaithful. He said after that, we could court openly. Gabriel leaned forward. Did he show you this letter? Emily shook her head. No. When I asked to see it, he said he'd burned it in anger. Because it never existed, Harriet said quietly. Emily's eyes widened. You mean he made it up, Gabriel confirmed. A convenient lie to break his engagement without taking the blame. Emily sat very still, processing this information. What happens now? She finally asked. That depends partly on you, Gabriel said. Would you be willing to tell others what you've told us? About Robert's lies? Fear flashed across Emily's face. The Dawsons are powerful. Robert's father could make trouble for my father's business. I understand your concern, Harriet said. But without your testimony, Robert will suffer no consequences for destroying my reputation with his lies. Emily looked torn. May I have time to think about it? To speak with my father? Of course, Gabriel said before Harriet could respond. Take the time you need. But please, keep our visit to yourself for now. As they left the Wilson home, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dusty street. Gabriel offered Harriet his arm, which she took gratefully, feeling drained after the emotional conversation. Do you think she'll help us? Harriet asked as they walked. I hope so, Gabriel replied. But even if she doesn't, we've made progress. Sally Turner's testimony, combined with Robert's threatening behavior at the schoolhouse today, begins to paint a picture of his true character. They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Gabriel spoke again. You handled that very well. Many would have been unable to show such compassion to someone in Emily's position. Harriet considered this. It would be easy to blame her, but the real villain in this story is Robert. Emily is young and trusting. He took advantage of that. Gabriel's admiring gaze made her cheeks warm. Your capacity for forgiveness is remarkable, Miss Foster. Harriet, she corrected him softly. I think, after all this, you should call me Harriet. His smile was gentle. Harriet it is, then. The next few days fell into a pattern. Harriet taught school during the day, facing down disapproving glances from some parents with quiet dignity. Gabriel often walked her to and from the schoolhouse, his presence a deterrent to those who might otherwise have confronted her directly. In the evenings, they worked together to gather evidence of Robert's deception. Sally Turner provided a written statement confirming she had seen Robert and Emily together on multiple occasions. The livery stable owner reluctantly admitted that Robert had often claimed to be riding to check fence lines when in fact he'd taken the road that led to the old Henderson place, a secluded spot perfect for clandestine meetings. 5 days after their visit to Emily, Gabriel arrived at the Foster home with news. Emily Wilson has agreed to speak with Reverend Thompson, he announced. She's too afraid to make a public statement, but she's willing to tell him privately what Robert told her. Harriet felt a surge of hope. When, tomorrow afternoon, Gabriel replied. And there's more. I've spoken with Judge Parker. He's agreed to be present when Emily gives her testimony to lend an official weight to the proceedings. Joseph Foster, who had been listening from his armchair by the fire, nodded approvingly. Judge Parker is a fair man. If he believes Emily's account, it will carry significant weight in the community. What about Robert? Harriet asked. Surely he'll deny everything. Gabriel's expression hardened. He can deny all he wants, but the evidence is mounting against him. And there's something else, something I haven't mentioned yet, because I wanted to be certain. What is it? Harriet asked, noting the serious tone in his voice. Robert has gambling debts in Cheyenne, Gabriel said. Substantial ones. I believe that's why he was so eager to marry you. He thought your father had land that could be sold to cover his losses. Joseph leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But why maintain that fiction when he discovered we had no significant property? Because by then, he was already involved with Emily, Gabriel explained. Breaking the engagement would have raised questions he wasn't prepared to answer. It was easier to keep up the charade until he could find a way out that didn't make him look bad. The non-existent letter, Harriet said bitterly. Exactly. Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. The man is a coward, hiding behind lies to protect his reputation while destroying yours. The following afternoon, Harriet, Gabriel, and Joseph made their way to the church where Reverend Thompson had agreed to hear Emily's testimony. The small group gathered in the Reverend's office, the same church where Harriet had been humiliated less than 2 weeks earlier. Emily was already there when they arrived, sitting nervously beside her father, the blacksmith's massive frame dwarfing the chair beneath him. Judge Parker, a distinguished man with a silver beard, sat near the Reverend's desk, his expression impassive. Miss Foster, Reverend Thompson greeted her with a nod. Thank you for coming. Miss Wilson has something she wishes to share with us. Emily's voice trembled as she recounted the lies Robert had told her about his engagement to Harriet, and his claim about finding a letter that proved Harriet's infidelity. Her father placed a supportive hand on her shoulder as she spoke. And you're certain Mr. Dawson never showed you this alleged letter? Judge Parker asked when she had finished. Yes, sir, Emily replied. He said he burned it, but now I wonder if it ever existed at all. The Reverend turned to Harriet. Miss Foster, I must ask you directly. Did you ever write such a letter to another man during your engagement to Robert Dawson? No, Reverend, Harriet said firmly. I have never been unfaithful in word or deed. The letter Robert claims to have found simply does not exist. Judge Parker stroked his beard thoughtfully. Mr. Hayes, you've presented statements from Sally Turner and Jim Bradley at the livery stable confirming that Mr. Dawson was seeing Miss Wilson secretly during his engagement. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Gabriel replied. And there are others in town who witness similar meetings but are afraid to come forward because of the Dawson family's influence. I see. The judge exchanged a glance with Reverend Thompson. This presents a troubling picture indeed. The church door opened suddenly, and Robert Dawson himself strode in, his father following close behind. What is the meaning of this? Charles Dawson demanded, his face flushed with anger. My son tells me you're conducting some sort of investigation behind our backs. Judge Parker rose to his full height. Mr. Dawson, this is a private meeting. You were not invited. Anything concerning my son concerns me, Charles snapped, especially when you're listening to lies from a jilted woman and her cowboy protector. Gabriel stepped forward, his voice dangerously calm. The only lies being told here are the ones your son used to break his engagement without taking responsibility for his actions. Robert's handsome face twisted with contempt. You have no proof of anything. Actually, Emily said, her voice surprisingly steady, we do. I've told them everything, Robert. About how you said your engagement was just a business arrangement. About how you claimed to have found a letter that you never showed me. About all the promises you made. Robert paled visibly. Emily, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, she interrupted, rising from her chair. You lied to me, just as you lied to Miss Foster. You made me believe I wasn't doing anything wrong by meeting you in secret. Charles Dawson looked at his son sharply. Robert, what is she talking about? For the first time, Robert looked uncertain. Father, I can explain. I think you'd better, Charles said coldly. As the Dawsons moved to a corner of the office for a heated private discussion, Reverend Thompson cleared his throat. I believe I've heard enough to form an opinion on this matter, he said. Judge Parker. The judge nodded solemnly. Indeed, based on the testimony presented and the character of the witnesses, I find Miss Foster's account more credible than Mr. Dawson's unsubstantiated claims. Relief washed over Harriet like a cool rain after a drought. She felt Gabriel's hand close gently over hers where it rested on her lap, a silent show of support that meant more than words could express. Charles Dawson returned to the center of the room, his expression grim. Reverend Thompson, Judge Parker, I apologize for my son's behavior. It seems he has not been entirely truthful about the circumstances surrounding the broken engagement. Robert started to protest, but a sharp look from his father silenced him. While I cannot undo the damage that has been done to Miss Foster's reputation, Charles continued stiffly, I can and will make a public statement clearing her name of any wrongdoing. Furthermore, my son will be leaving Cottonwood Springs for the foreseeable future to work on our ranch in Montana. Father, Robert exclaimed, aghast. Not another word, Charles said firmly. You'll leave on tomorrow's stage. I'll join you there once I've settled matters here. He turned to Harriet with a formal bow. Miss Foster, please accept my sincere apologies for the distress my son has caused you. Though the apology came from the father rather than the son, Harriet recognized it as the closest thing to justice she was likely to receive. Thank you, Mr. Dawson, she said quietly. As the meeting broke up, Gabriel escorted Harriet and her father outside into the late afternoon sunshine. The weight that had been pressing on Harriet's chest for days seemed to lift slightly with each step away from the church. It's over, she said, almost in disbelief. They believe me. Gabriel smiled down at her. Of course they do. The truth has a way of coming to light, even when some try to bury it. Joseph Foster watched the exchange with thoughtful eyes. Hayes, why don't you join us for supper again? I believe this calls for a celebration of sorts. As they walked toward the Foster home, Harriet was keenly aware of Gabriel beside her, his steady presence a comfort she had come to rely on more than she cared to admit. When their hands brushed accidentally, neither pulled away immediately, and the brief contact sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the evening sun. The news spread quickly through Cottonwood Springs. Charles Dawson, true to his word, made a public statement at Sunday services clearing Harriet's name. Robert was indeed sent to Montana, departing on the stage with a face like thunder and not a word of apology to anyone. In the weeks that followed, life gradually returned to normal for Harriet. The whispers died down, and most of the townspeople, eager to stay in the good graces of both the judge and the reverend, treated her with renewed respect. Some even offered awkward apologies for having believed the worst of her. Gabriel continued to be a regular visitor at the Foster home, often joining them for supper or accompanying Harriet on walks through town. Their friendship deepened with each conversation, each shared moment. One warm evening in June, nearly 2 months after the disastrous wedding that never was, Gabriel invited Harriet to ride out to his ranch. "I'd like to show you what I've built," he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident manner. "If you'd care to see it." Harriet accepted without hesitation, curious to see the place Gabriel spoke of with such pride. The next day, he arrived at her door with a gentle mare saddled and ready. "I hope you don't mind riding," he said as he helped her mount. "The wagon is slower, and there's much I'd like to show you before sunset." The ride to the Hayes Ranch took them through rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. Gabriel pointed out landmarks along the way: a rock formation shaped like a sleeping bear, a creek where the fishing was particularly good, a hillside covered in Indian paintbrush. As they crested a rise, the ranch itself came into view. Harriet caught her breath at the sight. A large, well-built house of squared logs stood proudly on a gentle slope, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and a barn big enough to house dozens of horses. In the distance, cattle grazed on the lush summer grass, their forms dark against the green landscape. "Gabriel, it's beautiful," she said sincerely. His face lit up at her approval. "It's taken 10 years to build it up to this point. When I first came here, there was nothing but an old trapper's cabin and a dream." He led her on a tour of the property, introducing her to his ranch hands, showing her the prize bulls he was raising, and finally bringing her to the house itself. Inside, the rooms were spacious and well-appointed, though with a distinctly masculine feel. "It needs a woman's touch," Gabriel admitted as they stood in the large main room with its stone fireplace and comfortable but plain furniture. "I've focused more on function than beauty, I'm afraid." Harriet moved to the wide windows that looked out over the valley. "It has a beauty of its own," she said, "a sense of permanence, of home." Gabriel came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "That's what I've always wanted it to be. Not just a ranch, but a home." She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how alone they were in the big house. "You've built something remarkable here, Gabriel." "It still feels incomplete," he said quietly, his blue eyes intent on hers. "A house isn't truly a home without love in it." Harriet's heart began to race. "No, I suppose it isn't." Gabriel took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. "Harriet, I didn't bring you here just to show you my ranch. I brought you here because I wanted you to see what I could offer you." "Offer me?" she echoed, hardly daring to believe what he might be saying. "I know it's too soon," he said hurriedly. "After everything that happened with Robert, I understand if you're hesitant to trust again. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship. Far beyond." Harriet felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly took her breath away. "Gabriel, you don't have to answer now," he continued, his words coming faster now. "I'm willing to wait, to give you time. I just wanted you to know that when I said I'd stand with you, I meant it then, and I mean it now. For as long as you'll allow me to." Tears pricked at Harriet's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I don't need time," she said softly. "What started as gratitude has become something much deeper for me as well." Gabriel's face transformed with hope. "Truly." In answer, Harriet reached up to touch his cheek gently. "Truly." With infinite tenderness, Gabriel leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a first kiss that held both promise and reverence. When they parted, his smile was brighter than she had ever seen it. "I love you, Harriet Foster," he said simply. "And I would be honored if, someday when you're ready, you would consider becoming my wife." "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling right and true as they left her lips. "And yes, someday, I would be proud to be your wife." They sealed this new understanding with another kiss, longer and deeper than the first, standing together in the house that would one day be their shared home. As summer turned to fall, Harriet and Gabriel's courtship became the talk of Cottonwood Springs, but this time, the gossip was kind rather than cruel. People noted how the once serious rancher smiled more frequently now, and how the schoolteacher's eyes lit up whenever he entered a room. Joseph Foster watched the developing relationship with approval, telling Gabriel privately one evening, "You've brought my daughter back to life, Hayes. For that alone, you have my eternal gratitude." When Gabriel formally asked for Harriet's hand in marriage that October, Joseph gave his blessing without hesitation. "You've proven yourself a man of honor and integrity," he told Gabriel. "I couldn't ask for a better husband for my daughter." The wedding was planned for the following spring, a deliberate choice on Harriet's part. "I want wildflowers, not snow," she explained when Gabriel asked if she might prefer a Christmas wedding. The engagement was announced at Thanksgiving, when Gabriel and Harriet hosted a dinner at the ranch for her father and several close friends. The news was met with genuine happiness from those gathered around the table. As winter settled over Wyoming territory, Harriet continued teaching while helping to plan the modifications to Gabriel's house that would make it their home. He insisted she change whatever she wished, encouraging her to order furnishings and fabrics from as far away as Denver. "The house should reflect both of us," he said as they pored over catalogs one snowy evening. "Not just me." The cold months passed in a flurry of preparations, both for the wedding and for their life together afterward. Gabriel built a small library onto the main house after learning of Harriet's love of books, while she learned to ride better so she could accompany him on his daily rounds of the ranch. Spring came early that year, bringing with it green grass, newborn calves, and the wildflowers Harriet had wished for. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May, with Reverend Thompson officiating at a ceremony on the ranch rather than in the church where Harriet had once known such humiliation. On the morning of her wedding day, Harriet stood before the mirror in the guest room of Gabriel's soon-to-be-their house, hardly recognizing the radiant woman who looked back at her. Her dress was simple but elegant, ivory silk with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with small white flowers gathered from the meadow that morning. A knock at the door revealed her father, leaning on his cane but standing straighter than he had in years. "Are you ready, my dear?" he asked, his eyes misting at the sight of her. "More than ready, Papa," she replied, taking his arm. Outside, the ranch had been transformed. Chairs were arranged in neat rows facing an arch twined with spring blossoms. Friends and neighbors from town filled the seats, along with Gabriel's ranch hands and business associates from as far away as Cheyenne. Gabriel waited beneath the arch, looking more handsome than Harriet had ever seen him in a new black suit with a silver brocade vest. His face, when he caught sight of her walking toward him on her father's arm, was a study in love and wonder. As she reached him, he took her hands in his voice low and meant only for her. "You are more beautiful than any dream I've ever had." Reverend Thompson smiled at the couple before addressing the gathered guests. "Friends, we are here today to witness the union of two souls who found each other through adversity and emerged stronger for it." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the time came for vows, Gabriel looked deeply into Harriet's eyes and spoke from the heart. "Harriet, when I first said I would stand with you, I had no idea that standing beside you would become the greatest joy of my life. I promised to honor and cherish you, to protect and support you, to laugh with you in times of joy and hold you in times of sorrow. I give you my hand, my heart, and my love, from this day forward for all the days of our life." Tears of happiness slipped down Harriet's cheeks as she responded. "Gabriel, you came into my life when I was at my lowest point and showed me what true strength and integrity look like. I promise to be your partner and equal in all things, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, to love you faithfully through whatever life may bring. I give you my trust, my respect, and my love, completely and forever." When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The cheers of their friends and neighbors washed over them like a blessing. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than even the hungriest ranch hand could consume. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the land that was now truly their home, Gabriel led Harriet away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "I never thought I could feel this way again, or that I would find someone who sees me so clearly and loves me so deeply." Gabriel turned her gently to face him. "When you ran from that church in tears all those months ago, I had no idea I was witnessing the beginning of the greatest blessing of my life." "Nor I," Harriet said softly. "It's strange to think that something so painful could lead to such joy." As twilight deepened around them, they shared a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future built on trust, respect, and a love that had been forged in adversity and would endure through whatever challenges lay ahead. 5 years later, Harriet stood on the porch of their home, watching as Gabriel taught their 4-year-old son Henry to ride his first pony. The little boy's laughter carried across the yard, mingling with the happy shrieks of his 2-year-old sister Grace, who bounced excitedly in the arms of her grandfather. Joseph Foster had moved to the ranch shortly after the wedding, occupying a comfortable cabin near the main house where he could be close to his growing family while maintaining his independence. Though his health had declined somewhat, the joy of watching his grandchildren grow seemed to give him renewed strength. The Hayes Ranch had prospered under Gabriel and Harriet's joint stewardship. They had expanded the cattle operation, added sheep on the higher pastures, and built a reputation for both quality livestock and fair business practices that reached far beyond Wyoming territory. Harriet had reluctantly given up teaching at the schoolhouse after Henry was born, but she hadn't abandoned education entirely. Twice a week, she taught the children of the ranch workers in a small schoolroom Gabriel had built for that purpose. She was also writing a series of readers for young children that a publisher in Denver had expressed interest in printing. As the lesson concluded and Gabriel lifted Henry from the pony's back with a proud smile, Harriet felt the familiar flutter of the new life growing within her. She hadn't told Gabriel yet about the baby expected in the winter. She was saving that news for tonight, when they would celebrate their anniversary with a private dinner after the children were asleep. Gabriel looked up and caught her watching. The love in his eyes, even after 5 years of marriage, still had the power to take her breath away. He said something to Henry, and the boy ran to his sister and grandfather while Gabriel made his way to the porch. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Hayes?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "You have that secretive smile I've come to be wary of." Harriet laughed. "Nothing for you to be wary of, I promise. I was just thinking about how full our life is. How blessed." Gabriel brushed a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "Do you ever think about that day? The day we met properly, I mean." "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with sadness anymore. How could I, when it led me here?" He kissed her softly. "I thank God every day that I was in town that morning, that I had the courage to follow you when you ran from the church." "I thank God you did too," Harriet said, resting her head against his chest. "You promised to stand with me then. I never imagined how completely you would keep that promise." "Always," Gabriel murmured into her hair. "For all the days of our life." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Harriet Hayes looked out over the land she and Gabriel had made their own. The ranch, the children, the love they shared, all of it had grown from that moment of deepest despair when a cowboy with kind eyes had said 7 simple words that changed everything. "I'll stand with you, Miss Foster." And he had, every day since.